back for another week, Dara.
Yes, we are.
Yes. This is week 10 of the college football season and week 8 of CaneSport's Countdown to Kickoff. Thank you for joining us once again, guys. We have a great show planned for you guys, but we have to start off. The Miami Hurricanes are back in action this week. Away game, the first time they'll be leaving the state of Florida. I know everybody was waiting. They've never left the state of Florida, but they're finally do it against Southern Methodist University this coming up Saturday. Southern Methodist University, SMU, sits at number 5 in the ACC standings currently. They're 5-3 overall, 3-1 in the ACC. And they're going up against the University of Miami Hurricanes, who are the number 10 overall team in the nation. They dropped a spot this past week after beaten Stanford pretty handily, but they dropped down to number 10 from number 9, but they currently sit at number 7 in the ACC standings, 6-1 overall and 2-1 in the ACC. But all 3 of SMU's losses coming into this game, they've been by single digits there. We were talking about this a lot. Of the SMU losses, even though they got 3 to Baylor, to TCU, and then Wake Forest this past week, it was a pretty close game, So the second matchup ever between Miami and SMU will take place this Saturday, and the last one was in 1965 before the SMU got that death penalty, but SMU won that game 7-3, and it's a lot on this game coming into it. But tell me a little about what happened last week with SMU, because they had some momentum going into last week, and it was a little bit of a gut-wrencher for them. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so not SMU's best game. We talked about their 3 losses being in the single digits, and it doesn't get any closer than this, okay? They lost to Wake Forest 12-13 in the very last second by a 50-yard field goal, okay? And the bright spot, the one bright spot, I would say, for SMU in this game was their defense. The defense actually forced 5 turnovers against Wake Forest in this game. And on the negative side, their quarterback Kevin Jennings completed 21 passes for 171 yards at a 53.8 completion percentage. Not really what you want to see. He didn't have his best game with no touchdowns and 1 interception. So that's obviously not ideal and probably what led to that 12-13 score that we saw. But on the other side, Miami's last week, a big improvement from what we saw against Louisville. Okay, they had a blowout win over Stanford after a kind of a slow start, coming in with, they gave up a touchdown against Stanford pretty early on in the game.
Like, oh my gosh, is it happening again?
I know it was scary. People clutching their pearls. Like, is this really happening again?
But they said not so fast, y'all. Not so fast.
They made the adjustments and they came back very strong, ending with a 42-7 win. So we're really excited about this game. It should be a pretty good matchup, and we're going to get into all the details, but before we get into that, we got to talk about who are we playing against, really? Okay, this game is a little bit personal, and it's because of the personnel.
Yes.
So we talk about Cristobal's Canes on this show. But have you guys ever heard of Cristobal's Stangs?
Yes.
This game is very personal for a lot of reasons, okay? There's a lot of people on SMU that have ties to Miami. Either they coached there or they played there before, and now they're at SMU.
So I'll get it started there. So we have to begin with the head coach on the other side of the field, Coach Rhett Lashley, former Miami Hurricane offensive coordinator the 2020 and 2021 season. But you talked about this game being personal because of the personnel. It's not just because on opposite sides of the ball they've been to Miami, but there's some family ties on the line in this game as well. There is another Bain on the other side of the field, Reggie Bain. And he worked at Miami under Alex Mirabal with the offensive line in the 2022 to 24 seasons. And he's Ruben Bain's older brother. So, there's a lot on this game. There might be some texting back and forth before the game. Who knows?
Little chirping.
A little brother rivalry coming into this game. But to stay on the whole family ties into this game. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later. There's another guy who has a little family connection in this as well. But to continue on about the Cristobal's Stangs, former starting quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes and former ACC Rookie of the Year, Tyler Van Dyke. He'll be on the other side of the sideline, just the sideline in this game. But Tyler Van Dyke, he was a former starter at Miami. And then we have to talk about running back Chris Johnson Jr., another former running back for the Miami Hurricanes. And then this one hurts a little bit more. But wide receiver Romello Brinson, he's the current leader for receiving yards for the SMU Stangs in this year. And he was a former wide receiver for the Hurricanes himself. So Dara, those are the Cristobal Stangs that we had to lay out. There's some extra motivation maybe that will be on the other side of the field coming into this game. But now we go. We've been adding this the last 2 weeks. We got to go to a little rapid fire section now, Dara, and we're going to talk about the ACC stat rankings between the University of Miami and SMU. So, ladies first, Dara, let's get it going. Yep.
For sure.
Pick it up.
The
Let's go.
University of Miami, when it comes to scoring, Miami's averaging 34 points per game, and that puts them at 6th in the ACC.
Yes, and then SMU is at 8th in the ACC, averaging 31.4 points per game, yes.
For rushing, UM is averaging 152.3 yards per game, putting them at 5th in the ACC.
SMU is right behind them, actually not right behind them, 10th in the ACC, averaging 122 yards on the ground per game.
And UM's averaging a 256.7 passing yards per game, putting them at 10th. But actually, SMU's a little bit better.
Yes, this is actually the only stat on offense that we will be listing for you guys today, that SMU actually leads the University of Miami. They are 9th in the ACC right now for passing yards per game, putting them at 266 yards per game averaged. So let's talk about the defense now, Dara.
Let's talk about
the University of
defense.
Miami leads in 3 categories. What are those, Dara?
Points allowed per game, total touchdowns allowed, and yards allowed per game.
First. Yes, tell me why.
Well, for points allowed per game, Miami's averaging 14.1 points. Total touchdowns allowed per game, that's at 11, and yards allowed per game, that's at 270.4.
Okay, but the sacks doesn't look good. Miami is sitting at 11th in the ACC at sacks per game, sitting at sacks overall, 15 sacks on the season so far, but it's a little different with SMU. They're first in the ACC. Tell me why.
Well, they've got 25.
25 sacks on the year. But the Miami Hurricanes and the SMU, they got a little tie going on here for our last stat. Dara, tell me about it.
Oh, they're tied for first with 7.
Tied for
Forced
fumbles. Yes, with 7 forced fumbles, they're tied. Yes. But if you see, guys, that's a little rapid fire there. But if you look at it all, we can't neglect to say, though, that these stat rankings, Miami has only played 7 games on the year so far, SMU playing 8. But out of those stat rankings that we chose to show you that we think are the most notable stats coming into this game, SMU falls behind Miami, 3-8, or Miami, I should say, leads SMU out of 5 of 8 categories. So yeah, Dara, that was a little rapid fire. Thanks for playing. I love doing rapid fire. I know you hate this. This was the rapid fire, yes. But now we have to talk about the SMU offense that made them be placed in those rankings for the ACC, but they're led by their redshirt quarterback, Kevin Jennings. So far on the year, he's had a decent season. He didn't have the greatest game against Wake Forest, as we already mentioned. 53.8% of his passes completed, no touchdowns, interception. But on the year, he's been pretty stable. He's not the most dual threat quarterback that Miami has faced in previous games, like a Byron Brown or Tommy Castellanos, but he does have the ability to get out of the pocket, maybe more than a Miller Moss that Miami has faced in recent games. But we also have to talk about the 2 running backs he has on the ground supporting the offense. Senior TJ Harden, he's a transfer from UCLA, and so far on the season he has 21 missed tackles. Additionally, redshirt sophomore Chris Johnson, another Cristobal Stang, transfer from Miami. He's a speedy back. He's had 314 yards on the ground so far on the season. He's added 3 scores as well, and his longest run of the year went for 87 yards, and he's had 5 runs for at least 15 yards. So it's maybe some big play possibilities that, Miami kind of struggled against Isaac Brown, who had some big plays out of the backfield, so we'll have to keep monitoring that as far as Chris Johnson goes coming into this game. But that's as far as the SMU hits you on the ground. Tell me a little about through the air, Dara.
Yeah, for sure. Once again, you're going to hear this. Another Cristobal Stangs. Wide receiver Romello Brinson. He's a redshirt senior, transferred from Miami in 2023, and he's having his best season as a Mustang. He's the leading receiver. He does his biggest damage as a deep threat, catching 4 of 8 deep shots for 193 yards and 3 touchdowns now. We also have tight end RJ Maryland Sr. He is a senior, and he's not directly a former Miami Hurricanes
That's what I was kind of
player.
talking about, guys. There's some more family ties in this game. Yes,
Ties,
tell me a little about it.
But he is the son of Miami Hurricanes Hall of Fame defensive end Russell Maryland.
Pretty cool.
It's a pretty cool.
So a whole lot on this game, guys, in every single way that's hit it. Yes.
In every direction, there is a tie to the Miami Hurricanes.
yes.
But he's had 19 touchdowns in his career and caught 19 passes for 218 yards on the season. And he's coming off of his most productive game versus Wake Forest, where he had 2 catches for 51 yards. And then onto the offensive line. This is a group of older veteran players. And this also includes former Miami Hurricane Zion Nelson, who hasn't seen playing time since 2022 because he's been dealing with injuries, but also important to note, another former Miami Hurricane. He's a rotational lineman. But the offensive line is largely led by Oklahoma transfer Josh Bates, who has not allowed a sack so far and has allowed 8 pressures so far this season. But what we saw from Wake Forest was that the offensive line did get banged up a little bit, and they weren't the only ones that, took a lot of hits against Wake Forest. So take it from Rhett Lashley himself. Donnie, could you please roll the clip?
We still got 2 more games before we get an off week, and we're beat up. We didn't have Cam We didn't have Smoke again on defense. We lost a ton of guys on offense. Who knows who will be available next week? Obviously, we got an incredible opponent coming to town, and then we got a road game all the way back to the Northeast Coast after that. And so the total of a season, this is kind of what we always said, as you go into this level, the depth, the wear and tear, the week in, week out is what's different.
So no one can say it better than their head coach themselves. He's not making any excuses, but that loss to Wake Forest, the SMU team was not to their full capability, or maybe just not at full strength is a better way to put it. Mm-hmm. They were definitely banged up, and we'll be monitoring that going into this Saturday, whether they'll get some of their leading players back. But he mentioned some of those leading players that were out of that game. Dara, could you tell me about it?
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely going to be something that we're going to have to look out for, and something that they're going to be preparing for as they come into probably one of their toughest opponents so far this season, and probably the toughest opponent they will play this season. So the Mustangs have been in a transitional period over the last year. They lost all but one starter from last year's group, and two of those veteran returners were Cameron Robertson and Jalen Davis Robertson, and those were two of the people that unfortunately did get banged up over the course of the season so far, and they were among of two of the veteran returners from last year's rosters to step up on this SMU team this year. So defensive end Cameron Robertson, he didn't play last week against Wake Forest because of some injuries. Robertson was the only rotation player from last year's defensive line to return in 2025, and he was second on the team with 5 sacks for 37 yards for loss. He is the fourth leader in tackles for 31 and 21 solo. And he has 2 forced fumbles. Cornerback Jalen Davis Robinson, he has 19 tackles, 16 solo, and 2 interceptions. And so this is a defense that they lead the country in turnovers forced. And you saw that their defense is a bright spot for this team. What they did with Wake Forest, forcing 5 turnovers against that team, and ultimately carrying them to honestly just a 1-point difference when it could have been a lot worse given the quarterback's performance.
Yeah, and speaking about a defense that leads the country in turnovers, 2 of those turnovers against Wake Forest came by their senior safety, Isaiah Nakobia, if I pronounced that correctly, excuse me. But Isaiah Nakobia, he had a fumble recovery and an interception in that game against Wake Forest last week. And so far on the season, he's had 2 interceptions, and he is the team leader for SMU in tackles, with 64, 34 of them being solo. Another senior on the team is safety Ahmad Moss. He is the second team leader in tackles, 54, 26 solo, and he is the team leader in interceptions with 3 interceptions on the year so far. And he picked up that 3rd interception last week against Wake Forest. But also I want to shout out another senior who's a defensive leader on the team as well. Defensive tackle Terry Webb. He's the team leader in sacks with 5.5 sacks on the year, going for 37 lost yards. And he has 1 forced fumble on the year so far. But listen off some of those SMU defensive leaders, Dara. Let's talk about the season leaders for both teams. Now let's compare them.
For sure. So obviously we got to start with the fearless leaders of the teams. CB, the quarterbacks, okay? Senior quarterback Carson Beck, he has 1,673 yards, 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 72.9 completion percentage. On the other side, quarterback Kevin Jennings has 2,119 yards, 17 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and a 66.3 completion percentage. How about those runners? Yep,
and then getting on the ground, RB1 Mark Fletcher Jr. for the Miami Hurricanes. So far in the year, 552 yards on the ground on 109 carries. He's also added 9 touchdowns, and so far in the year he's averaged 78.9 yards per game, and that sits him at 5th in the ACC for running backs or averages. But on the other side of the ball, it will be senior running back TJ Harden for the SMU Mustangs. He has 455 yards on the ground so far on the year, and he has had 109 carries as well, but he's added 5 scores. And then tell me about those wide receivers. Tell me about that guy. We told him we mention every week.
Trust me, he is that
guy. Yes, that guy.
But
tell me about him.
And that guy is Malachi Tony. He's had 562 yards on 43 catches and 3 touchdowns. On the other side, it's Miami native, former Miami Hurricane, Romello Brinson, with 515 yards on 37 catches and 3 touchdowns.
Awesome. We think every single week about what we're going to do to prove the true
you fans.
Yes. So we got to give you the trivia now, guys. But Dara, you're the one that picked the trivia this week. Let me give you your flowers. How'd you pick the trivia? Yes.
I did. So I was at the Stanford game, of course. I'm always there because I'm working and such.
Yes.
But yeah, so I was just watching. I saw Mark Fletcher had a really great game, and Miami had a really great game, but especially him. He had 3 touchdowns. And, I was just thinking, I looked more into his career stats, and I found this. He actually set his own record this game, and I was just wondering if the U fans would know this one.
Yeah, so let's see.
Yeah,
let's see. Cue to the trivia, Don.
hope the true U fans got that. And if you didn't, I hope you learned something.
Yes.
But actually, in this game, Mark Fletcher Jr., he set 2 records for himself. He scored 3 touchdowns in one game, and that's a career high for him. And it was his 6th multi-touchdown game of his collegiate career. So, but that's all the time that we have for you guys today. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure you tune in to the game this Saturday.
Yep.
And
Big week, Dara. Another great week.
Another great week.
Yep. Thanks for coming again, Dara. It's always a great time with you.
Yeah, we always have a great time.
But we thank you guys as well for joining us for episode 8 of CaneSports Countdown to Kickoff. We'll be back next week as well. Give it a like, a subscribe, maybe a follow, maybe a comment, guys. But we appreciate y'all as always. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.